Good evening, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your third and final video blog of the night for Sunday, April 26, 2015, around 8:14 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. Sun went down. It's going to be another cool night tonight. Some news to report. The Minnesota Wild beat St. Louis Blues by the score of 4-1 to take the series 4-2. It's going to be the Wild against the Blackhawks in round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The LA Clippers even their series against the San Antonio Spurs. That's going to probably be the only entertaining series of the first round in the NBA playoffs. And the Baltimore Orioles beat the Boston Red Sox by the score of 18-7. That's about it on the news. My third and final video blog subject of the night's the personality profile, and this is the continuation of great WWE managers who led their men to the WWE Championship. The next one I'm going to be talking about is James E. Cornette, or Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette was one of the most famous wrestling managers of all time. He also was a booker and a color commentator for his years in the world of sports entertainment. Jim was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and as a kid he loved professional wrestling. He loved it so much that he would use an antenna at his house to get old regional territories from his television, and he saw a lot of regional territories in the South and stuff. When he was a teenager, Jim would photograph matches in Louisville, Kentucky for regional territories and send them to wrestling magazines. In 1982, Jim Cornette made his professional wrestling debut as a manager in the old CWA territory. He first co-managed the First Family with Jimmy Hart for about a year or so. Then he went to Mid-South Wrestling and he managed a tag team called the Midnight Express, which was beautiful Bobby Eaton and Loverboy Dennis Condrey. And Jim Cornette would dress in polyester, which by the early 80s was out of style. Plus, he used a weapon, a tennis racket, which was his famous weapon. He would use it when the referee wasn't looking on the baby faces. And Jim Cornette he was great on the mic. And for the next several years, he managed the Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey to many tag team championships in Mid-South, and then they went to World Class Championship Wrestling in 1985. They had a feud with the Fantastics. They also had a feud with the Rock and Roll Express in Mid-South Wrestling. In late 1985, the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette went to Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic, and they were heavily pushed. They won the NWA World Tag Team Championships in February 1986, feuding with the Rock and Roll Express, and they had a long-running feud with them. Also, Jim Cornette got a bodyguard, which was Big Bubba Rogers, who became the Big Boss Man in the WWE. And the Midnight Express were one of the greatest tag teams of all time. They feuded with the Road Warriors in Mid-Atlantic as well. Jim Cornette was in the scaffold match. He got attacked by the World Warriors. He blew out both his knees in Starrcade 1986 and stuff. And the Midnight Express rescued him. In early 1987, Dennis Condrey was replaced in the Midnight Express by Sweet Stan Lane. So it was Sweet Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby. Jim Cornette continued to manage them until 1990. They won a few NWA/WCW US Tag Team Championships and even the NWA World Tag Team titles. And also during that time, the Midnight Express turned babyface and feud with the original Midnight Express, which was Dennis Condrey, Randy Rose, and Paulie Dangerously and stuff. And the Midnight Express even feuded also with the Samoan SWAT team and the Freebirds. They turned back heel when they feuded with the Dynamic Dudes, who were Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas. Jim Cornette was advising the Dynamic Dudes at first, but eventually the Midnight Express got jealous and they had a tag team match on a Clash of Champions. The Midnight Express was actually the heels, but they were getting big face pops, and Dynamic Dudes were faces, but they were getting heel pops and Jim Cornette hits Shane Douglas with the tennis racket. He was supposed to be in a neutral corner, and the fans popped like crazy. And around this time, Jim Cornette was doing some color commentating for WCW Broadcasting. He was also on the booking committee, but he had his problems with Jim Herd over the direction of the Midnight Express characters were going. There was a rumor that that towards the end of 1990, Jim Herd wanted to break up the Midnight Express to feud with each other and have like Bobby Eaton feud with Stan Lane. I heard some original proposal. It was going to be Stan Lane turning face and Bobby Eaton being a heel with Jim Cornette still managing Bobby Eaton, but Jim Cornette didn't like it, so he and Stan Lane left WCW. For the next couple of years, him and Stan Lane wrestled in a couple of independents in the South, like the GWF and the USWA and some other small territories. 1992, Jim Cornette formed Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the southern United States, like one of the last best regional territories. He manages a new team called the Heavenly Bodies, which was Sweet Stan Lane and the Doctor of Desire, Tom Pritchard. In fact, Tom Pritchard was originally going to be part of the Midnight Express in 1987, but he was kind of tied up in other regional territories, and he couldn't go to NWA. And the Heavenly Bodies were one of the best tag teams in professional wrestling in the mid-1990s. And also Jim Cornette created a lot of talent in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, including Al Snow, Unabomber, who became Kane, Sonny, and Skip. Around 1993, Smoky Mountain Wrestling had a working agreement with WWE, and Jim Cornette finally came to the WWE. He brought the Heavenly Bodies. Then he became the American spokesperson for WWE champion Yokozuna because Mr. Fuji needed some protection, and Jim Cornette actually was a co-manager of the WWE tag champion Yokozuna, and he was managing him for about a year and a half as well. Eventually, Smoky Mountain died off, and Jim Cornette stayed with the WWE full-time. He also managed a few other wrestlers in the WWE around that time, like Manta. I had a dream years ago that Manta got job to a guy named Nike Santapio, who was a kid at the Boys and Girls Club Greater Berwick. I had a dream about that, but that's another story for another day. And he also managed Owen Hart. He convinced the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith to turn heel, which I didn't really like the heel turn, but Jim Cornette convinced him to turn heel. And he eventually managed Vader in the WWE. In 1996, Jim Cornette became on the booking committee in the WWE, but a lot of his ideas didn't really work with the WWE and stuff like that. Jim Cornette was temporarily phased out as a manager. In the end of 1996, he focused on more announcing duties, more backstage stuff for about a year or so. Then in 1998, he comes back as a manager, and he manages the NWA stable, which was Jeff Jarrett, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton, and Robert Gibson for a while, and then Barry Windham. Then he eventually turns on the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton, and Robert Gibson, and they have a new Midnight Express who was Bob Harley and Bart Gunn. This was an awful Midnight Express to have with the Rock and Roll Express and stuff. It was awful and stuff, and also he managed Dan B7 and stuff, but I think this NWO angle for the WWE was to embarrass Jim Cornette and stuff, and it was awful. And Jim Cornette continued to stay on like WWE, working backstage and doing some color commentating on secondary shows for the late 1998 and early 1999. Finally, in the mid 1999, Jim Cornette goes down to Old Valley Ohio Wrestling to become the booker, and he runs talent roster. He was with Ohio Valley Wrestling for about 6 years, but Jim Cornette and WWE had a lot of arguments on directions of certain wrestlers. And in 2005, WWE fires Jim Cornette as head booker of OVW, and then Jim Cornette goes to TNA, becomes the director of Authority. He was pretty good as an authority figure for about 2-3 years, but eventually TNA and Jim Cornette had disagreements on how his director of authority character went. Then he joined Ring of Honor for a while, but then 2012 he leaves Ring of Honor. And Jim Cornette, like, since then hasn't appeared on a wrestling show, but he still does a lot of, like, an podcast. He has his own podcast. Plus, in addition, Jim Cornette is on a lot of DVDs with independently produced videos. They had a roast of Jim Cornette, which I have on DVD, which is pretty good. And they also have guest booker with Jim Cornette about him rebooking the invasion angle for WWE and WCW in 2001 and stuff like that. And Jim Cornette's probably one of the top 10 best managers of all time. He was a great talker and stuff. He managed a lot of great wrestlers besides the Midnight Express and the Heavenly Bodies and Yokozuna. He actually managed a young Hercules Hernandez and Rip Oliver and Dick Murdoch and the One Man Gang, the Iron Sheik Ken Patera, and a few others and stuff. And Jim Cornette was 3 times Manager of the Year for PWI 1985, 1993, and 1995. He's in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, but he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame. And Jim Cornette says he probably will never go in the WWE Hall of Fame, but I tend to believe if they call him up and if Jim Cornette's asked to go into the WWE Hall of Fame, he'll accept it, because it's all about the money and stuff like that. And, I actually have a book that he wrote, that he made in 2009 about the Midnight Express scrapbook, which is one of the best wrestling books of all time and stuff. And I missed James E. Cornette a lot, and his suits were awful, but that was part of his character. And he's probably goes down as a great ring entertainer with, like, managing and talking and stuff. He could, and in fact, I think he should have, been like on as the SmackDown's heel announcer when they started in 1999, like this with, like, Michael Cole and Jim Cornette. He did the pilot, but they should have kept him on as the heel announcer. And that's about it on Jim Cornette. And this is the end of these video blogs for tonight. Tomorrow, 3 more video blogs. First video blog will be about Fox Sports Arizona. Then the second video blog will be about Chungking, the Chinese restaurant in Berwick, Massachusetts, which has a great buffet. Tell you about that. The final video blog of the night will be the last of the 8 WWE managers who led their men to championship gold. I'm talking about Jimmy, the Mouth of South Hart. And the rest of the month will be 3 days of Cleveland's greatest sports, some of the Cleveland's greatest sports athletes, which will include Bernie Kosar, quarterback of the Cleveland Browns for many years, and then Brad Doherty, the center of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who was probably the best player in Cavaliers history until LeBron James, and then Jim Thome, the all-time home run king in Cleveland Indians history. And May is going to be a great month for these video blogs. Leggy blondes who have, like, the 3 personality profiles: Molly Rosenblunt and Amy Swenzy and Elizabeth Hart. They were 3 3 meteorologists for Orlando television stations. Then stories about the Boys and Girls Club Greater America. Top 10 list of anything returns, which will have the top 10 players of each 30 NBA franchises and so many other things. I'll be back tomorrow. Good night, and keep calm. And I'm a Julie Broughton guy, and in the words of Sean Lucha, get out. Bye.